Sure. My name is Tory Campbell, and that's ToryCampbell.
So where do you live, and have you always lived here?
Yeah, so I live in Portland, Oregon. In particular, I live in southeast of Portland, and I've lived in this area for well over 25 years of my life almost.
Where have you lived before?
Previous to this, I've lived in the Bay Area, so kind of the Oakland and Berkeley area.
So what would you miss most if you had to leave southeast Portland?
Tomorrow.
You have to go tomorrow. What would you miss most?
Yeah, that's good. Would it be another geography I'd have to move to?
You're just moving out of here.
You're like, man, come on, Tori, don't get to all these extra detailed questions.
All I know is you're moving out of Southeast Portland.
Yeah, Southeast Portland. I mean, I would miss the community that we're nestled in, the accessibility that we have to the things we enjoy, whether that be within the city limits. I'd also miss the access that we have potentially to what we can get an hour and 15 minutes either to the east, going to the mountains, or to the west, going to the coast. I'd miss a lot of relationships. I have family here as well. So if I'm taking your question to heart of literally having to leave the city, I would also miss a lot of those kind of relational connections. You've obviously seen my backyard. I love what my backyard affords me to be able to do in terms of having a little bit of kind of urban farming, so to speak, in a place that's really convenient. So those would be some of the things that would stand out.
What's your household like? Who lives with you?
Yeah, so I have a wife, wonderful wife of it'll be 20 years in December, and 3 children. So we kind of comprise the immediate family and household here.
So how do you earn your livelihood? What's your
Yeah, so I'm both and. So the job by day and then the side hustle by night. So the job by day, I'm a director of economic development for our economic agency in a city called Prosper Portland. And then kind of the side hustle, if you will, is also the food company that I started with my wife almost 6 years ago, called Felton and Mary's Artisan Foods. So those together really comprise a lot of what I do and who I am.
So in 1 or 2 words, how would you describe the year 2020? And then why did you choose those 1 or 2 words?
I would describe 2020, I would say the words that come to mind are for real. Stated as like, for real. So, because it's just been that kind of way. It's on so many levels.
Describe the moment. Let's go. Describe the moment COVID-19 became real to you, and what were the emotions that you were feeling at that moment?
I think by virtue of the role and vantage point that I have in the city that we serve in terms of supporting our city and communities from an economic standpoint, I was privy to information, a little bit more information than others early on, but still didn't fully grasp it. I would say for us, it became real. I want to say March 12th is when I believe the governor issued kind of certain health requirements and the need to stay at home. All of that began to start happening. And so for us as an agency, it went from a conversation on Thursday within our executive team of looks like probably on Friday we'll have to have folks working from home. So we need to quickly figure out how to do that till Monday, which was there's a level of permanency towards that working at home. And I think that's when the real seriousness of it, because as an agency, I guess the backstory is we have had a difficult time making those pivots of working via satellite or teleworking or all the things now that 3 months into the pandemic are just kind of normative things, working on virtual chats and calls. We weren't doing that before. And so for us to go and say everyone has to work from home and be ramped up, it meant a lot for us to be like, wow, this is really serious, because inherently you would find us kind of butts in seats in cubicles, and that constitutes we can see you, so you must be working. And that's the place of optimum like work output is going to be in an office, and that was no longer the case.
So what was it like emotionally for you as a leader, having to navigate?
Yeah, I think as a leader you tend to you can compartmentalize, I would say, your thoughts and emotions. You typically start going into problem solving and thinking of others. Like, okay, how do we get our teams in position? How do we ensure they have the resources that they need? How do we help them figure out what their family dynamics are going to be? Because also coupled with that is we had just heard probably a day or two, either before or after that moment, that kids would be pulled out of school. And so that also was a whole new set of challenges. And I think at that time it was like, they'll be out for a couple of weeks. So the good head fake. I think that 2 weeks almost probably helped keep social unrest from like breaking out. Because once we were home, then it was like, the rest of the school year is done. But at that point, you're already like out of school. So I think as a leader, that was where I was at. And my emotions were really centered on just help as a father, obviously as a partner to my wife, and a leader, just trying to figure out how do I kind of make sure everybody is settled. But then I was also overcome with fear, anxiousness, the uncertainty, because you begin to see the real impacts of the virus in terms of just how many people were contracting it. We also was fortunate enough to get on a call with economic development directors from San Francisco, Seattle, and New York. And we started having like these weekly chats. And as you remember back then, they were probably 2 weeks or a month ahead of us. And so hearing their stories it was great to be in the room, but they were very disconcerting. So that also was like, oh my gosh, this is a legit, real thing.
Mm-hmm. So how did your daily life change at first?
If you could pan over, you would see this shed. That has been my place of office and some of my like prison confinement, Grateful for it, because I know a lot of people aren't afforded even the space to do their job at home and have kids and everything all over their shoulders. But for me, it was like my family actually kicked me out of the house. They got tired of me saying, "Stop, I'm on the phone call with the mayor." They're like, "Look, we all got to coexist, dude." So they actually went to carpet and hung up some sheets and kind of made a false wall in there and put lights up and a few plants to try to make it feel like home. And they're like, "There's your office." So I literally have spent the last 3.5 months in that shed every day. And there were days in early spring where it was still like really cold. So I'm in there with blankets on and because it's not insulated and all, but no complaints because I had a place to work and I know a lot of folks didn't have that.
So now that we're about 100 days-ish into this world, how's your daily life now?
I would say there's a level of familiarity to the rhythm. Still, there's still a lot of discomfort with it. Because if you would ask me, hey, would you like a job that requires you to be nimble, to understand a lot of the political dynamics, and also have to help with a lot of economic thrust and strategies and pivots in the city? And you have to do all that on Zoom calls. That could be between 9 to 10 hours a day, back to back to back to back to back to back meetings, and you do it in the shed next to a chicken coop. Would you do the job? I would say no. So it is, it's just been difficult, but the familiarity has helped me figure it out. We all are adjusting, right? And figuring it out. So to that end, it's been good. I would also say probably you catch me on a week where this is like the first week where I have sensed a noticeable shift in the intensity and the urgency of the work. So just been on like high beams, adrenaline push for the last almost 3 months, trying to understand, get ahead of, be proactive, be responsive to the needs of our city, small business owners, be collaborative within our agency, who's also itself trying to learn how to do all this kind of over virtual channels, and be collaborative with other bureaus who we've just never had to live and lean into this work in this way. So it has been everything in terms of difficult, but at the same time, something I feel like I was built for. And the work has been compelling. We've put in, thinking about how do we serve the most vulnerable in our city. We factor in race and equity. So those are also compelling things for me to say, how do we do this work differently and show up differently for our city? So,
has there been any habits or routines that have emerged over the pandemic that, as we get into a new normal state, that you hope you keep?
Yeah, with all of this, there's always like a silver lining. I would say probably one of the real cool things is proximity to my family. Just literally rolling out of bed, and as I say, like being business ready from the waist up. There's just a chance to connect with them. Breakfast, I can step out the shed. They're here. We can go outside and play a game of horse. We can go on a walk with my wife. We can catch up. So that proximity and closeness has been really precious. I think also a newfound appreciation for relationships, because I think before we valued them, but we'd also been so distant and disconnected from the busyness of life to sports and being entertained, and just to now you're confined and you have to understand the importance of family. So we've taken to Zoom chats with my mom on a weekly basis, my brother and his family and ours, where maybe we would have some distance in terms of the frequency we communicate. It became a routine. And that was really important for all of us, for our own mental sanity and connectedness. I wouldn't have gotten that had this not happened. And I think those are just some examples of the silver lining in all of this.
So what was the biggest challenge for you throughout this pandemic?
That's a good question. I think the biggest challenge professionally is having to adjust what have been like strengths and muscle groups that I've developed over time as a leader, that now everything is virtual. Many of those have gone to the wayside. As in getting to a room, body language, posture, reading the room, like all those things that are real, I believe, are important keys to me in terms of understanding how to move things along and shape things. You don't have that, so you're just staring at a screen intently, and all those things are gone away, and your jokes don't land. You misinterpret a frown. There's something happening on their end of the video, like a child is walking through naked. You don't know that, and so you're just seeing someone frowning on their side. There's just all these different things that are happening. And that's probably been really hard, because you're having serious, very intense conversations that are, for sure, for businesses, life or death. And also just because of the virus, there's a life or death dynamic. So I think that's probably been like one of the biggest things. Just I'm like learning new skills, having to trust new muscles, and just sometimes getting off calls like, I hope that landed well.
How does this compare with any other big challenge you've had in your life?
I think this is definitely one that is up there in terms of the amount of rigor, strategy, the importance of the work. It's definitely a top 5, but I still think there's some other things that I've had to experience that have prepared me for this as well.
Do a quick adjustment. Your collar just folded under. Get you up here. There we go.
Yeah.
A little bit better. I'm afraid that the microphone is going to go
and muffle it. Yeah. Yeah.
Tory sounds like a meat grinder. All right. How do you think your daily life's going to feel like 2 years from now?
Well, that's a good question. Depending on if we're still in this kind of dynamic where we might be flirting in and out of kind of these moments where we're having to go back to social distancing and staying home. That could very well be the case. And yet at the same time, I now know that we can do tremendous things in support of the city, working virtual and in the shed too. So it also has given me more range of what's possible, of my ability to lead, what's possible of my ability to be collaborative, what's possible of our ability to shape policy and initiatives to support people. So very grateful for this moment. The challenge has definitely awoken some new senses of both capacity and capability, and that's been rewarding.
So in the challenges you see at your work and within your community, what excites you most about solving them?
Say it again?
In the work, in the challenges you see at work, but also challenges you see in your community, what excites you most about solving them?
I would say probably one of the things that excites me most, and I've really appreciated about being in this role, is being able to see the immediacy of decisions that we have made have impact. And I think, as you know, economic development tends to be sometimes kind of a long play. Not everything you see right away shows up. But in this moment, these challenges, it literally has been. Had we not done this, you wouldn't have done that. Had we not created this small business relief fund and were able to quickly dispense, small chunks of dollars to needy business owners within a span of 10 days from start of the initiative to having, dollars dispersed and seeing the difference that it made, like that was rewarding to me. And I know that not everyone is afforded that opportunity, particularly in this moment. So I see it as a real privilege to be able to know that not just simply our work counts, but that it can show up and have immediate impact.
So, over the last, since Memorial Day weekend, we've had this emergence to the forefront of the racial injustice conversation of America that's now very apparent to people. What was your reaction to the George Floyd incident? And then how would you describe Portland's reaction and response after that? What happened here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say my response was it just went into kind of the annals of my mind of kind of Black experience at the hands of law enforcement and a system has been designed and built to police us, to keep us sequestered and potentially do harm with us and be justified by it. The heinousness of it was definitely like the brazen being filmed, looking dead into the camera, like what, that part was shocking. But honestly, it was like, man, that yet again, here we go. What took me by surprise was the kind of the convulsion that our nation went through as a result of it. And that's blown me away. Because what for me was just like, yet again, we will march, but what will it do? I wouldn't say hopeless. It's just the trauma that's there. You have to learn to navigate that. And it has been surprising, like honestly, how white folks have all of a sudden awoken from major cities to rural communities around this movement, where once before, and there's still political dynamics to it, obviously, and it's polarizing. But to see that phrase Black Lives Matter, show up in a Coeur d'Alene, Idaho protest, to a Dallas, Oregon protest, to places where you would just not assume that folks would care or would resonate, that has been pretty profound. And I almost feel like the pandemic has played a very unique role in that, in that it's really sequestered all of us. So we have to be fixed on that which is like confronting us. And so the social media, the news, whatever is coming at you, you have nowhere else to go but to be fixed on it. And I think the way our nation has come alive in some respects, I think is an example of people like looking at this video, looking at the tail of the tape and saying, okay, I can't be entertained by sports. I can't go fishing. I can't, to go to picnics and barbecues. I have to myself wrestle with this and figure out how is this showing the true colors of our nation and the history that's there. And I think that has been curiously eye-opening for me, in both experiencing, participating in, and seeing how folks have shown up in this conversation in a different way, trying to figure out what do we do different and then what's our role to play.
What one or two words would describe how you feel about the next 5 years? So 5 years forward, what's the one or two words that you would choose?
I'll almost be an empty nester, so there's a lot there. But the next 5 years, how would I describe it in one or two words? That's a good question. I would say hopeful. I mean, that's just kind of there's something irresistible and necessary about being hopeful, in spite of whatever circumstance that you're in. That positions me to be in a posture of being both willing to lean in, to be an agent of change in whatever sphere and influence that I have, and also being willing to receive that which is good that can come even out of the darkest moments and challenging times, whether we're talking pandemic or we're talking about kind of race relations and many of the social injustices that we experience as Black folks in our nation, is still being hopeful.
What do you wish people would know about the work you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because sometimes I don't even know what I do. I shouldn't say it as such. It's just, what is economic development? You know, it's this and everything. I think the one thing I would want people to understand is that business and the ability to start a business is a very necessary and integral part in really having I think, a healthy and vibrant community. And so we should always make that a priority as much as we do everything else. And I think particularly in the matters of equity and diversity and upward mobility, like small business ownership has shown itself to be a viable way towards more prosperous wealth creation for individuals. And so in that you can find strong equity. It's not just capitalism pure and simple. Like there is a mission that can be associated with that towards justice and a more just society. So I think that to me is important, is that there really is a mission assigned to it, for how I understand it, beyond just the consumption or the acquisition of more and greed.
So, is there a question I should have asked you that I haven't asked you yet?
I don't. This would be one of those questions too. Like right when you drive off, and I'm like, "Peace." I'm like, "Dang it!" I should ask him about, or this should have been a part of the conversation.
Well, Len, you can let that gestate, but I'll tickle your brain a different way. Tell me about the business that you and your wife have. What is this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about that all day, primarily because it centers on talking about being third generation, entrepreneur. And it's really a chance for me to continue to be a steward of both my grandparents' legacy, Felton and Mary, and who they were as two wonderful people in my life and the lives of many others. It's also to help to carry on a tradition around a love for urban farming and community and generosity and food. And I think in particular, food associated with barbecuing. My grandparents really loved to cook food of all different nationalities and heritages, but barbecue was one of particular interest and like skill for them. So that's the food company. Started 6 years ago. We brought these products back to market. We had a restaurant in Portland named after our last name, Camels BBQ, for about 18 years, just up the street here where I grew up. And that was a place of business. And that was an understanding of how my grandparents shown themselves to be a community organizer through making meals and creating hospitable places. And it's been a joy to be able to bring that back to market. My kids now have a greater understanding of where they come from, understanding who their great grandparents are. And I think that's important, that we connect ourselves to our ancestors generationally, that it's not, you just didn't show up, that there is something that you are a part of that's bigger than yourself. And the product is just really good as well. So I think those are the things that have brought me tremendous joy in all of this. And also I think it helps me in my profession as an economic development director, where my ideas, or that which I intend to focus in on, aren't simply ethereal, abstract, but it really is rooted in my own personal journey and experience as a small business owner, and also a business owner of color in our city as well. And I think that helps to refine any of my ideas and strategies that we're thinking about deploying from a city perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tory, as I've traveled from Indiana to here, now that I'm in Western Washington, Oregon, it's predominantly white. Mm-hmm. It is predominantly white. Having lived in Atlanta, it's not predominantly white. Mm-hmm. Right? So what's it like to be a person of color in leading business development, economic development, and having a company, and being a family man, a father, a partner? What do you wish people would know what that experience is like?
That's a good question. You got a lot of good questions. I don't know. It's my reality. I will say this, probably because the mission of our organization has shifted over the last few years, where we historically have been complicit in a lot of the harm done to communities of color in our city, gentrification and displacement, all those things. I realized when I stepped into working at Prosper Portland, I was kind of moving into the bowels of the beast. And a lot of my work around equity was going to have a lot to do with trying to reform it from the inside out. And I feel very fortunate the role that I currently have and I serve in really affords me a chance to both display leadership that reflects that, but also to pull some of those levers and position resources, strategies to really help a much broader array of business owners in our city that currently or historically have not been valued or esteemed. And I think it's really been to a detriment of our economy. I've always said it's like if you have 12 oars that you can put in the water, but you only row with 2, there's some foolishness with that. And in many ways, racism is that. It is supremely serving one community over the whole, and yet you have the whole have the same capacity, appetite, potential to create businesses, business innovation, and be leaders of the rich assets that we have, not only in our state, but in our region. And so it's not just becoming an anti-racist organization or becoming more equitable isn't just a moral imperative. It just is economically smart. And so I really appreciate the chance as a Black man to be able to lead an agency that has given me the freedom and to unapologetically pursue that to that end. And I think that's probably what's been unique about my role, right? It's not just me being a token, literally a Black face in an organization that will continue to be harmful to our communities that they should be serving well. Now I'm not confusing that with the fact that we don't have a ton of room to grow, but I can definitely feel like the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of my efforts have been about bringing that kind of change and being supported in that way. So that's unique. I think personally as a family, without question, we know that we feel like we're a piece of pepper in a salt shaker living in Portland. There's no doubt about that. But I've also been raised to know who I am, to be unapologetically about that, to also appreciate what I have here in the city. I do appreciate a lot of the ethos of the Portland community, but it comes from a different place. Like we were joking, and obviously we were like, oh, you got chickens, you got beehives. That's so Portland. But for me, that comes from a place that people may not realize. Is my grandparents, they were from the South originally, and farming and gardening has always been a part of our family's life. My grandpa modeled for me. He grew his own, worms. We'd go fishing. He'd be like, go outside, boy, in that box that you've been putting coffee grounds and eggshells and scraps of veggies in. I'm like, what is that? He's like, those are the worms that we're going to go fish with. I mean, that's just how I grew up, right? Where he said, go outside and get me some mint and some thyme. I'm like, what does that look like? It's all green. You're like, boy, go figure it out. And so farming and connectedness in that way and having chickens I just grew up with. To your point, though, I mean, that is the thing of the Portland ethos. It's like, but it also gives me a chance to let folks know that we get down with those things, but it comes from a different place. And we also appreciate the ethos of what Portland affords us, kind of the environmental kind of dynamics. It's welcome and necessary, because there's also like environmental justice that's a part of just how you live and your access to green spaces and forest. All those things are important. And so for me being here and enjoying those things, I want people to see that Black folks do that. We do go camping, you know what I'm saying? When afforded the chance to do so, we get into those things, not because we are trying to be anything other than ourselves. And that's part of my life here, living here. I don't take it on like a personal mission every day to teach, the majority culture here who I am, but I will live my life and have good relationships that I've enjoyed from folks from the big city of Portland to the small towns like Amity and Sublimity and Nissa and you know what I'm saying, like all over. Like Oregon has been a unique place to grow up and live for sure.
So somebody's gonna be watching this because it's on the internet, right?
Uh-oh.
So,
in perpetuity now, huh? Once you post it.
Forever in the Borg. I don't know when they're gonna watch it. I don't know who's gonna watch it and where they're gonna watch it. But someone's watching this right now.
Yeah.
As being, whatever we record. So it's like a time capsule.
Yeah.
What message would you want to put into that so that whoever's watching this right now, what message would you want them to hear from you at this moment?
Yeah, that's such a great, gosh, there's so much that can be said. I think the things that I would want people to understand of this moment, we're in this pandemic. It's kind of ripe with fear and uncertainty. And yet, even in this moment, resiliency, the brilliance, kind of the human imagination, I think the quest for justice, and for equity and equality are all in the mix too. I think the thing that I want people to understand is, one, there's nothing new under the sun, and there's never an opportune time to do good or do right, but right now. And so if they're watching this, I hope that they have heard from the conversation we've had, someone trying to live into that. Like, this is an unopportune time, but it is the right time to be a leader, whether that be within your family, within your community, wherever you find yourself having an opportunity to be an influencer, to do right, to make a more kind of a just and verdant society.
Beautiful. Is there anything else you want to share?
I mean, I'm a lover of road trips, so I applaud you. I'm very jealous right now. I have a Vanagon in the front, just to go ahead and ratchet it up another level of you're feeling like, man, that's all too Portland. Got a love for VW vans because my grandpa rode one. He had a type 1 as a kid growing up. So it just comes from a different place. That's all I can say. You might want to say put Portlandia on me, but it just comes from a different place. My grandpa was a different kind of dude. And so I'm very jealous. And I think it's pretty dope that you drove all the way here to see your son too. Yeah. That speaks volumes of just what it means to be a pops. And for you to try to capture this story. I know you're going to meet and have met a lot of interesting people. And so I look forward to not only being a part of this, but also just understanding to what you're going to learn of how we're all trying to navigate this world, this crazy, messy world together. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.